If the hierarchy type that you want doesn't exist, you can create your own hierarchy type using the Manage Custom Hierarchy Type app F3553. You can also jump directly to this app from the Manage Global Hierarchies app, and you can jump to the Manage Global Hierarchies app from this app. It's straightforward to create a new hierarchy type. You simply click on Add and select one of the attributes from the drop-down, and then click Create. You can use the Edit User-Specific Options for Journal Entries app F2130 in order to select the field to use an alternative account to search for a GL account when creating a journal entry. In order to better understand some of the fields that will be used in the transactions in the next section, I want to talk about some key objects in the general ledger, such as the different document types, as well as how to understand the postings and the document flow. If you're already familiar with SAP, this section should be particularly interesting, as there are some areas and functionality which are new in S/4HANA, such as the Universal Journal and the new apps to analyse the data. I'll also explain some of the fields that we'll be using in the transactions in the next section and what options are available. In this section, I'll go a bit deeper into more of the general ledger terms, starting with the Universal Journal, which is an important concept in S/4HANA. I mentioned double entry in section 1. In this section, I'll show you the T account app, which allows us to easily follow the double entry of one or more transactions. I'll explain a bit about how the data flows in the general ledger and show you the document flow app. I'll go into what document splitting is and explain some other important items in finance, such as the document types and so on. There are a number of ways the currencies can be used in S/4HANA, so I'll explain a little about that and the exchange rates, and finally the usual tips and tricks at the end. In section 1, I explained that in SAP ERP, data was stored in lots of small tables, but that now, thanks to the extra processing power in S/4HANA, many of these tables have been merged into one table, AC.A, along with additional data from other modules. The name of this table is the Universal Journal Entry Line Items, as you can see from the slide. So what exactly is the Universal Journal? Technically, it's the name of the document that contains the financial postings from a transaction. Although similar in concept to the financial document in SAP ERP, the Universal Journal is more, universal, as you'll see in the next slide. It brings together the finance and controlling postings and much more into a single source of truth, and makes the previous periodic reconciliation between financial and controlling now redundant. In this and the next slides, I've used the GUI table display transaction to help explain the AC.A table, simply because it's easier to see with this transaction rather than any one Fiori app. The slide shows the contents of the AC.A table on the left, with some of the sections split out on the right to show you a sample of the variety of fields available in AC.A. As a user, unless you're creating reports or you use the GUI to display tables, you probably won't see much of the AC.A table itself, but you'll probably come across the term Universal Journal, and thanks to this table, you now have a lot more information from other modules available in standard finance reports. For example, fixed asset transactions have detail of the asset number, even on the depreciation postings, which were previously summarised at a higher level. This slide shows the financial report just to give you an idea of the sort of fields you can see in finance. I couldn't fit all the possible columns available into one slide, but I took a few extracts of the line item entries display app to give you an idea. Other fields that you can pull in, for example, are account type, cost centre, fixed asset, functional area, house bank, journal type, quantities, sales order and billing document numbers, WBS element, and many more. We'll also see later in the reporting section the multi-dimensional journal entry analyzer, which allows you to report in even more detail on journals and include secondary cost postings not shown in this slide. As mentioned in section 1, in double entry bookkeeping, there must be an equivalent amount of debit postings for every credit posting, and vice versa. The easiest way to see this quickly is using the concept of T accounts. As an accountant myself, I've always used this to help me analyse the data flow when designing and configuring a particular process, as well as when trying to analyse what's happened with a particular posting or reconciling an account. The name T account comes from the fact that traditionally, for each GL account you're looking at, there's a header with a horizontal line drawn underneath, and the middle is a vertical line with all the related debits on the left and all the related credits on the right, like a T. Prior to release 1909 of S4HANA, I always had to draw this by hand. I'm sure many other accountants will be as delighted as I am to discover that S4HANA now does this automatically. I've drawn the purple T in the slide to highlight the T part. The slide shows a single document with a credit to a supplier and a debit to the office supplies expense account. As we're in the general ledger, you don't see the supplier details, only the reconciliation account or control account for the whole supplier subledger. Another very useful app in S4HANA is the Display Document Flow app, F3665. You can select the option Journal Entry, Sales Document, Billing Document, and so on, or choose all document types. Depending on the document type, you then need to enter the document number, and in some cases, the company code and financial year as well. The screen then shows the document flow. If you select the year in a financial document on the lower left of the screen, you can also click on Display as T accounts to see the detailed postings. I'm going to demonstrate how easy it is in S4HANA to jump between various documents and look at the T accounts and different document flows along the way. Let's say that I'm checking a supplier invoice document, although I could use a custom or any other document that has other documents related to it. I'm starting with the Manage Journal Entries app, which lists all the journal entries, and I'll filter by document type RE to see logistics invoices posted against purchase orders. I select an invoice to display it. It shows me there's a credit to the supplier account and a debit to the GRIR account, but I don't know which supplier or which cost account it went to, nor if it was stock or fixed assets or if the goods have been received and so on. Clicking on the T account view at this stage will just show me the same thing, in other words the debit and the credit, unless it was an intercompany postings document, in which case I'd see the other document in the other company code as well. If I go back and click on and open out the documents in the Related Documents tab, I can now see all the documents in the flow: the purchase order, the goods receipt, and the invoice, as well as the related material documents. I can click on any of the items in blue to jump directly to that item in different ways. For example, if I click on the purchase order and choose Display Fact Sheet, I'll be able to see all the details, including what was ordered on the purchase order. And I can drill down to the logistics items in blue, in other words, the material document for the goods receipt and the invoice if I wanted to. If I go back and click on the PO again and choose another app, either one that's visible, or I can go into more links and add other apps to the initial pop-up. This time I select Display Process Flow Accounts Payable. I can see the document flow in graphic form, including the payment clearing documents if applicable. I can also click on the table icon and see the tabular form. I'll go back to the Manage Journal Entries screen, and this time I'll select an accounting document and choose Display Document Flow. At the top of the screen, I see the operational document flow, in other words, the logistics or material documents, and below I see the accounting document flow. If I select both documents here and click on Display as T accounts, it takes me to the T accounts flow. I'm just going to remove some of these ledgers before I press go, as I only want to see the leading ledger postings. Now you can see the T accounts of both documents at the same time. If I press go, and if I hide the filter bar and reduce the size of the screen a little, I can see all the financial postings in the transaction for both documents. To make it easier, I'm going to change the colours of each item, so you can see which item relates to which document. I can also use the Settings button to add the document description to show that the first item is the vendor invoice and the second item is the goods receipt. This item is for stock, but if it had been an expense, there'd also be an entry in the profit and loss account area. Many of a business's transactions are initiated outside of the general ledger, but finish in the general ledger with the related finance posting. This doesn't include requests, where no physical movement of goods or cash takes place. For example, a purchase requisition, a purchase order or sales order don't affect the general ledger. But when there is a movement of goods or value of cash, the general ledger is updated as well as the relevant sub-ledger. The slide shows an example flow from purchase order to payment, but in this particular example, only the last two items, the journal entry for the invoice and the clearing document or payment, are physically posted to the general ledger. Although for the invoice, there's a material document and a financial document shown in the flow, the goods receipt only shows the material document. Although if you drill down into the material document, you'll see the accounting document in the process flow of the material document itself. You can see in the top part of the slide a similar flow for the sales order. Here, the only financial document is the accounting journal entry, although in this case the billing document and accounting journal share the same document number. They're physically two separate documents. The billing document contains more details about the sales area, products sold, quantities, etc., whereas the journal entry shows the financial amounts by GL account and cost or revenue objects. You can also see the data in the form of a table instead of a flow diagram. Document splitting is useful when there's a requirement to have the complete financial statements at a lower granularity than the company code. The good news is that the splitting, if correctly set up, occurs automatically in the background, and most users are probably completely unaware of it if they're not running or analysing profit centre reports or segment reports. Document splitting ensures that each posting, even to accounts such as payables and receivables in the balance sheet, is balanced by profit centre or segment. The entry view of the document shows as normal, but if you look at the general ledger view, you'll see the split. An example might be an invoice for training of $400 split into two different departments, each with different profit centres and segments. In the entry view, because there's only one credit to the vendor, and each debit is posted with a different profit centre, usually derived from a cost centre or other cost object, although the total of the journal will be 0, the total of each profit centre or segment will not be 0. In many documents, the entry in the general ledger view will be the same, but in some there'll be an additional posting in the general ledger view. The slide shows the general ledger view, in this case the parallel IFRS view of the example I just mentioned. But here, as you can see, the payables line's been split in two, so that each part can take a different profit centre. There are different rules on how the system splits the profit centre. For example, when a payment is made against the invoice, and for other types of transactions. But as it is the postings in this view that you'll see in the profit centre reports, it's good to understand why these additional postings are made. Note that the supplier account itself, or any remittance advice, will only show the original invoice with a single line, i.e. the entry view. In some cases, it's not possible to split the account, for example where there's no balance sheet account that exists, so a document splitting clearing account can be used. In this slide, the Profit Centre Actuals report, you can see that each individual profit centre and segment balances to 0 thanks to the document splitting process. And you can also see that some profit centres show the document splitting GL account. The most obvious way to see where a transaction has come from at a glance is by the document type, as this is usually available in most of the key reports, especially the GL line item reports, as well as the supplier and customer line items. The most common document types are shown in the slide, but there are others and you can create your own. You have an advantage if you speak German, as many of the 2-digit document types, as well as other areas of SAP, are often based on the German abbreviations. Usually, the document type defaults in automatically depending on the app or transaction that you're using. For example, when you go into the app Post General Journal Entries, SA will usually show as the journal entry or document type, although you can change it to something else if required. In addition, the document type indicates the number range that's used, and a number range can be used by more than one document type. Having a unique sequential number, for example for all types of sales invoices, helps ensure that there are no gaps, and it also makes things easier to find if you're searching for a specific document or type of journal. In the configuration, you can also specify what account types the document can be used for, whether discounts are deducted, whether negative postings are permitted, whether more than one customer or vendor can be entered, whether it can be used across company codes, and whether it needs a trading partner. You can also specify whether the reference number and document header text should be mandatory and what document type should be used if the document's reversed. Each document will have several different dates stored within it. The system will automatically assign an entry date and time which cannot be changed. Posting date, as the name implies, is usually the date that you enter the transaction. However, as it also dictates which period the transaction is reported in, it can be changed to match an earlier or later period. On the first or second day of a new period, for example, you may still want to post entries into the previous period, so you change the posting date accordingly. As I'm often working in a sandbox anyway, I often set the posting date to automatically default to the current date for speed. The journal entry or document date refers to the date when the transaction took place. Sometimes this will be the same as the posting date, but, for example, supplier invoices are often received some time after they've been raised by the supplier. In this case, you would enter the date on the invoice as the document date rather than the current date. The translation date used for the exchange rates usually defaults to the posting date of the document, but it can be manually amended depending on the transaction. Some countries also set a tax reporting date, and you may also get a park date where a document is parked prior to posting. Invoice due dates are calculated using a baseline date, which is set according to what's configured in the payment terms and can be based on the document date, posting date, or entry date. The posting key is a 2-digit code indicating the type of posting as well as whether it's a debit or credit. For example, 31 is used for a supplier invoice and 25 for a supplier payment. In most cases, the posting keys are assigned automatically, but it's still useful to be familiar with them as they may be used for reporting, and they are still currently required for some transactions such as certain fixed asset acquisitions and disposals. Posting keys can be used for more precise reporting, particularly when building reports. They were used a lot in the earlier versions of SAP when entering a document, but are rarely available for selection in the S4HANA Fiori apps, with the exception perhaps of some of the fixed asset transactions. Some of the finance posting keys you might see with accounts receivable, accounts payable, general ledger and asset accounting transactions are shown in the slide, but others exist in the 80 and 90 range for stock movements and price differences, for example. You may have slightly different keys and names depending on releases and if your organisation has renamed or created any of its own. In addition to helping identify transactions for reporting, the configuration behind the posting key also indicates whether it's a debit or credit and which account type it relates to. It also dictates, for example, whether it's related to sales or payments, which then allows the transaction to be available in certain types of reports or KPIs, for example, the payment history reports. In addition, it works similar to the GL account on field statuses and the screen layout during posting a document. You can still create your own posting keys, but as you wouldn't normally enter them in the apps, they would tend to be for bespoke programs. Postings can be recorded in a number of different currencies. The company code or local currency is fixed and is the currency which the company operates in. Although this is normally the currency of the country where the company is registered, this is not always the case. If a company does most of its trading, for example, in US dollars, but is based elsewhere, it may decide to keep its books in US dollars. The document or transaction currency will often be the same as the company code currency, but may differ, particularly where organisations trade with other countries. In addition, there may also be a requirement for companies to record transactions in the group currency if their local currency differs from that of their head office. From S/4HANA On-Premise 1610, you can also define up to 8 additional freely defined currency types and different currencies for different modules such as material, ledger and controlling. The app shown in the slide is the Currency Exchange Rates app 3616, which allows you to display the exchange rates and also to maintain them manually. You can configure a number of exchange rate types, the most common one being Type M, which is the best practice default exchange rate used by most organisations for normal transactions. Exchange rate Type P is often used for planning, but you can create as many new types as required. Where countries are legally required to value currency transactions using a specific rate, for example, the government-issued or national bank rate of that country, you may need to create a specific exchange rate type to be used by company codes in that currency for their local reporting. For each exchange rate, you first have to decide whether you want to use direct or indirect quotations and what ratios you want to use. For many currency pairs, such as the euro and the US dollar, the ratio 1:1 is sufficient. But particularly in areas of higher inflation and where there are a number of digits in the exchange rate, some currencies may have higher ratios, for example 1:100 or 1:1,000, to be able to quote the exchange rate more accurately. To add a new exchange rate, clicking on Copy or Create opens up the side panel where you can enter the new data and save. Note that exchange rates have a validity start date, but only end when the next exchange rate is entered. You can also export the exchange rate table to Excel, and you can display a log of any additions or changes. The log shows the change as well as the time and date of the person who made the change. In addition to maintaining the exchange rates manually, you can also set up exchange rates to be uploaded automatically from specific sites on the internet, or at the end of the period you can upload the exchange rates as you want using an Excel spreadsheet. It may be that standard M rates are uploaded automatically each period, but the other rates such as planning and local country rates are entered using a different method once a year. The app in the slide is the Import Exchange Rates app F2092. You first download an Excel template similar to that at the bottom of the slide, and then you complete the template and click on Browse to find and upload the file. I've seen a few mistakes in this area where users have accidentally loaded the exchange rates either with the wrong ratio or mixing direct and indirect. So in addition to checking the values, make sure that you are careful that you have the exchange rate the correct way round and with the right attributes. If you choose a specific exchange rate and click on the arrow right at the end of the line, you can see details of that specific exchange rate, such as the trend and the change log for that specific currency pair. In the Currency Exchange Rate app, F3616, you can click on the Currency Converter button to see the value in another currency pair for a specific amount on a specific date. This is useful to check what exchange rate a document will pick up based on the posting date. If you're familiar with the GUI transaction EWCT, this has similar functionality. The slide shows the app F2130. Edit user-specific settings for journal entries, although some apply more to settings for the GUI journals. We saw the alternative chart of accounts field in section 3, but there are other useful fields here, for example setting the dates and periods, and you can see explanations by clicking on the help functionality, in other words the question mark in the top right if you have it. This app, Automatic Account Determination F1273, may only be accessible to your IT department or the consultants who are doing the configuration in the development system. However, I thought it worth mentioning in case you do have access to display it or want to check something. First you choose the area, for example controlling, financial accounting, sourcing and procurement, or sales. Depending on the area you chose, you'll have a different choice of sub-area. For example, for financial accounting you have accounts receivable and payable, bank accounting and general ledger accounting. Then you choose the process. Some of the current options in my system are shown in the slide, but again this may vary between systems and versions. Here I've chosen the retained earnings account to see what account the system will carry forward the balances to at the year end. The screen shows another example where I've chosen the tax code information. Here I have to select the tax code and related information such as chart of accounts, country, etc. And having chosen the tax code, I can now see the account assignment information. This section will cover everything related to posting journal entries, the different ways that you can post them, the different types, and the things that can be done with the journal once it's been posted, such as reversing the posting, clearing one journal with another, and resetting the clearing. I'll start off by explaining the general structure of a document, before talking about the different ways of entering, holding, simulating, and amending journals, and there'll be a few demonstrations. There's some interesting functionality involving journal entry templates, and you can also upload journals using Microsoft Excel, which I'll also demonstrate. If there are journals that are the same every month, I'll show you how to set up recurring journals. I'll talk about intercompany postings and the related functionality, and then I'll go on to the other transactions that you can use in the general ledger, such as clearing, reversing, and resetting. Then there are a few tips and tricks at the end. Financial documents in S/4HANA all have a similar structure. The slide shows the supplier invoice document displayed using the Manual Journal Entries app F0717. Each document consists of a header containing details that refer to the whole document, for example dates, period, document type, company code currency, ledger and exchange rates where applicable. Some fields are fixed by the system, for example the created by date and time fields. In addition to the header, you can have 2 or more line items, which in a normal document must balance back to 0 in order to be posted. By normal, I mean not a statistical document. Statistical documents may not balance back to 0. In theory, the total number of line items in the Universal Journal in S/4HANA can now go up to 999,999, as opposed to the 999 available before S4HANA. But the number of lines may still be restricted in the source document. The Manage Journal Entries app can be used to display documents and also to edit or reverse a document, which we'll see later in this section. This same structure is applicable to all types of financial posting, whether entered manually or uploaded. This slide shows the drill down into the supplier line item of the journal shown in the previous slide. All line items will have a line item number, a GL account number and an amount, but depending on the GL account field status group, may have different fields that are mandatory. For example, most field status groups intended for balance sheet accounts will not display cost object fields. If one of the line items refers to a subledger, for example a supplier as shown in the slide, the GL account shown will be the reconciliation account linked to that item, but you can drill down to see the supplier and other details such as payment terms and discounts related to that specific line item. The Post Journal Entry app F0718 is a good starting point if you want to make a journal entry. You have a number of different options available from this screen. The app can be used to create a journal manually, as well as to upload one or more journals already created in Microsoft Excel or in another format such as CSV, comma-separated values. You can also use the previous journal that you've posted as a reference, or select different templates with some of the fields already pre-filled. For example, if I have similar journals to post every month where only the amount changes, I could create a template with GL account field and cost object fields already completed, so that I only need to change fields such as the date and amounts. I could use this, for example, for the monthly payroll journal. I can always amend the pre-filled GL accounts or cost objects when I do the posting. One of the standard templates allows you to create an auto-reversing journal, where you can set a reversal reason and the planned reversal date, for example the first day of the next period. Then when the new period is opened, you can go into the Schedule General Ledger Jobs and the system will check all journals to be auto-reversed. You can run this in test mode first to check. The Post Journal Entry screen is structured similar to the document itself, in other words with a header and at least 2 line items, although you can add more line items with the plus button. Although at first glance there are not a lot of fields available in each line, once you've completed the header and entered the GL account into a line item, you can then click on the arrow on the left-hand side of the line to open out additional fields relevant specifically to that GL account. As mentioned before, the available fields depend mainly on the field status group of the GL account. Expense accounts will usually require, for example, a tax code and a cost centre, if a primary or secondary cost account. Bank-related accounts may require a value date, and so on. Text can be entered in the document header text field if they refer to the whole document, or in the line item text field if they only refer to a specific line. Depending on the status of the line, at the far right end of each GL account you may see a green square showing that the line is complete, or a red triangle showing that something is missing or incorrect. If it's red, you will not be able to post the document until it has been corrected. You may also see the colour yellow. For example, in this case, the tax field border is yellow, meaning that the tax field is relevant but not mandatory. In the bottom left corner is a small blue box which I've expanded. This contains related coloured messages which you can expand further In this case, there's one red blocking message, which refers to a missing cost object, and an amber or yellow warning triangle to inform that the selected GL account is relevant for tax, but for this particular account, postings without tax are allowed. In the top right of the screen, you can see the total, which must be green and usually 0 in order for you to post the document, but you can put it on hold if there's a red balance. The double down arrows at the top of the slide expand all the lines, and the double up arrows close all the lines. You can attach a related document or enter notes by clicking the relevant tab at the top of the screen, and a tax posting summary is shown below the line items. If you've entered a lot of information but cannot complete the journal immediately, either because you have to check some information or you have an urgent task or lunch or whatever, rather than risking losing the data you've already entered, you can put the journal on hold. This saves it but doesn't post it, so you can then retrieve it, complete it and post it at a later stage. When you click on the button Hold Journal Entry, you have the option of viewing or deleting an existing held journal or saving the current journal as a held journal. When you click on Save, you're asked to provide a temporary ID for the journal. The slide shows an already held journal that I've just retrieved. Although you could, for example, give a sequential number or other alphanumeric reference, in this case I've typed Hold Payroll to show that you can also enter a description. Once you've completed entering the details of a journal, you can simulate it to check the postings. Although to some extent you can see most of the detail prior to simulation, some information is not shown or checked until you simulate, and some error messages may not appear until this stage. The slide shows the simulation of the previous held journal. Once the final journal is posted, the held journal is then automatically deleted. After posting, I can choose to create the next journal from scratch by going back to the journal entry screen, or I can choose Display, which takes me to the Manual Journal Entries app where I can either check or amend the journal, or I can use it as a reference to enter the next journal. If I had completely messed up the journal, I could also reverse it by clicking on the Reverse button at the bottom right. I can now go on to create another journal by clicking on the button New, where I get the choice of creating a completely new journal or creating a similar journal to the one that I've just posted. If I click on Create a Similar Journal, there's a pop-up where I can choose one or more of the following: Generate reverse posting, Do not propose amounts, or recalculate amounts in local currency. I can also get to a similar screen from the Manage Journal Entries app if I wanted to copy a similar document, for example from a previous period, where it might make sense to recalculate the local currency values at the current exchange rate. From the Manage Journal Entries screen, once I've chosen a document, I can edit certain fields by using the Edit button. Only certain fields can be changed, such as the text, reference or assignment fields. Fields such as dates, accounts, amounts and cost objects cannot be changed without creating new postings. You'd probably mainly post a tax-only amount as a vendor invoice, but just for completeness, assuming the tax account is not set to only automatic postings, if you try to post the tax directly to the tax account, you'll also need to enter a base amount and tax code. Base amount is not actually posted anywhere, it's just for information. If you post a vendor invoice in the same way, in other words directly to the tax account, it will also ask for a base amount and tax code. I'll just demonstrate entering a very simple journal so that you can see the whole thing. First of all, I select the Post Journal Entries app F0718. You may need to enter the relevant dates, company code and currency though. I have mine already defaulted in for speed. Note that if you want to use one of the special year-end adjustment periods such as period 13, you'll need to enter a posting date from the end of the last period of the fiscal year in order to enter the adjustment period number, for example 31st of December if you have a calendar year end. The exchange rate will normally default in based on the posting date, but it can be overridden. If you leave the ledger group field blank, the journal will be posted automatically to all ledgers if you have more than one. Otherwise, if you want to make an adjustment that's only relevant to a very specific ledger, you'll need to enter the relevant ledger group. I've entered a comment in the reference field, although you could also enter information in the line item text. I'll keep the default GL account journal type SA. In the line item, I enter the two accounts I want to transfer between first for speed and then the amounts. But you can do that in any order, in other words, complete the details of one line before commencing the next, as long as you don't press enter. You can see the little icon on the right changes colour only when I press enter. At the moment it's showing an error, as I have no cost objects, so I open out each line to select the cost centre. In this particular case, tax is relevant to both accounts, but only mandatory in the second one, along with the tax jurisdiction as it is a US company code. Once I've completed everything, the status icon becomes a green square. The total debits and credits must balance in order to post the document, which you can see at the top right. I simulate, and as everything seems okay, I can post. If I now click on New, I have a choice whether to create a completely new journal or use the journal I just entered as a basis for the next one. I could create a similar posting, but in reverse, or I could create a similar posting but with different amounts. In this case, I leave everything blank to create an identical journal. I check the journal and suddenly wonder if I should use the same cost centre, so I put the journal on hold while I go off and check. I could enter a code, but it's more helpful at this point to know why I put it on hold, so I enter simply check cost centre. I get back from checking and it was okay, so I reselect it by clicking on hold and choosing view. And then I post it. It shows me the document number, and I get the option to display it or go back to the initial screen to create another journal. Another tool is the journal entry template. I can click on the button, select Journal Template to see the existing templates, or I can create my own either by entering the Manual Journal Entries Templates app F3803 or by clicking on the Select Templates button in the Manage Journal Entries app and selecting and jumping to the app from the button in the pop-up. Still on the subject of journal entries, if you regularly post a similar journal, for example the payroll or the split of a telephone bill to different departments, you can also create a different type of template. Obviously you can create one in Excel as well and use the upload journal functionality, but in case for whatever reason you don't want to use Excel, here's a quick demo of the template functionality. I go first to the Manage Journal Entry Templates app F3803, and in the Journal Entry Template screen I can refresh the screen and see the existing templates. I can also add the auto reverse templates to the overview screen. I'll just remove two of the columns so that you can see the descriptions of the remaining columns better. From the overview screen, I could select a template and jump straight to the Post Journal Entries app by clicking on the blue description in the Apply Template in column. First, let's have a look at an existing template. I can display a template by using the arrow on the right, and once in the template I can either display it or click on Edit to change anything. There's also a check button at the bottom right. In the first section, you see the header fields. You can either make them optional or mandatory, or you can already enter a constant if the value will be the same every time. For example, I've entered the company code, and also a header text monthly payroll. In the second section, you can see the journal entry line item details. You can see the 3 GL accounts that have already been entered. I just select the fields that I want to see in the journal. In this case, as it's payroll, I've not included any sales or purchase tax codes, just the GL accounts. I don't have any cost objects entered, but I could choose an edit and first select the field names that I want to enter a constant against, and then select the constant itself further down. Note that selecting the box on the left chooses the field, and selecting the box in the middle makes the field mandatory. The box on the right is read-only. Without it being selected, I could change any constant, but if it's read-only, then I cannot. If I now go back to the overview and display my auto-reverse template, you can see that the main difference is that there are additional mandatory fields for the reversal reason and planned reversal dates. Creating a new template is similar. I click on the Create button and first fill in the template ID, any description and the access level. I can keep the template just for my own use, or share it with other people in my company or group, or I could select the Share Publicly button to share with everyone. I won't bother to create a whole new template, but if I just quickly scroll through the screens, you can see the same fields that we were looking at earlier. Let's go back to the overview screen and select one of the blue Post General Journal Entries buttons, and again click on the blue Post Journal button. This takes me to the posting screen. You can see that the 3 lines appear, and all I have to complete are the amounts and check the date. If the screen is too small, sometimes you need to open up the credit field by clicking on the 3 dots. If I open up one of the GL account lines, I can also enter the cost centres. I'm just going back to put the amounts in. Of course, it would help if I got the right number of zeros. I'll simulate to make sure that I have everything correct. I click on Post, and I can also display the document to double check. To create a journal with the auto reverse functionality, I go to the Post General Journal Entries app and click on Select Template. Here we can see the auto reverse templates at the bottom of the list. I select one. And as you can see, it shows the auto reverse tab so that I can complete the reversal reason and planned reversal date. I'll select the reason code number 5, which I've created for accruals, but you may have different reversal reasons in your system. If I click on the Header tab, you can see the standard header and line item fields. In this case, I could add a reference of some sort, such as April accrual. And then I'll probably need a cost object on the P&L line, so I'll open out the second line and enter a cost centre. And of course I need some amounts. I'll simulate, and apart from the purchase tax, which is not relevant for the payroll, everything seems good to go. So I'll post the journal and make a note of the number. Assuming I will have a number of journals to auto-reverse, I can go to the Schedule General Ledger Jobs and create a new task, selecting the option Post General Ledger Journal Entries with Auto-Reverse. In step 3, I select my company code and test run and click Schedule to see what journals are there to be reversed. First it shows in progress, and when it's finished, I can click on the log to check for errors. If everything is OK, I can run it again, removing the test run selection. Next, I go to the Manage Journal Entries app F0717. Click on the journal number and then Display Document Flow, and you can see it displays both journals, the original and the reversal. I can display either journal, or I can also see the journals in T accounts. By clicking on the palette and adding a colour, I can more clearly see which is which. Another option is to go into one of the journals using the Manage Journal Entries app and then click on Related Documents to see the reversal journal. Let's have another look at the app Manage Journal Entries F0717. On the initial